Hi, everyone, and welcome back to the Fluid Fan Podcast. I'm your host, Angela Ruggiero, the CEO and co-founder of Sports Innovation Lab, four-time Olympian back in the day. If you don't know what we do, I'm glad you're joining us for the first time. We are a leading sports market research firm. We sit at the intersection of sports and technology, help our clients create breakthrough fan experiences through technology. This podcast is all about understanding tech in sports and specifically how fans are changing, what their behaviors look like, and how fluid fandom is being influenced by technology. We use data and insights to really study the fan. So we're fan experience experts. Welcome to this podcast. Have spent an enormous amount of time looking at the industry, supporting our clients through research, advisory, data-driven dashboards, leadership boards, et cetera, Love to work with you. If you are interested, always ping us at sportsilab.com. If you're tuning in today again for the first time, I've been talking a lot about the FAN project. I am super excited. That research report goes live on June 21st. Check out thefanproject.co or visit sportsilab.com to check out more. It's all about the business case for women's sports, something we talk about a lot on this show, and really the future of sports. There's a lot of really great nuggets that you'll see in that report when it goes live on the 21st about the fluid fan. So I can't wait to share that with you. So today I'm joined by a longtime friend, an advisor to Sports Innovation Lab, and really a true expert in the industry, Dr. Laila Mintas, the CEO of PlayUP in the USA. She is a member of our Women's Leadership Board. She's just an incredible woman, spent tons of time in the three phases of the sports betting industry that we talk about a lot, and uses her knowledge of the global betting market to really help PlayUP make their mark on the US. So she's an investor, an entrepreneur, someone that's doing more in the SPAC space, and I'm just really excited for her to come on and really give us some insights on the sports betting market, how fans are expecting more, and what that looks like overall for the sports betting industry. So let's jump right in with my interview on sports betting with expert Dr. Laila Mintas, again, the CEO of PlayUP USA, on today's podcast. Welcome back to the Fluid Fan Podcast. Very excited for our guest, as you've heard. She's not only an entrepreneur and investor, but a sports betting expert. Dr. Laila Mintas, the CEO of PlayUP USA. Welcome to the Fluid Fan Podcast.
Thanks for having me, Angela.
Well, I've known you for a bit. You're actually one of our advisors. You sit on our Women's Leadership Board. I've got to know you quite well, Dr. Mintas, and you are absolutely probably in very high demand as the sports betting landscape is blowing up. But before we dive into what you do now and the sports betting space in particular, you have a very interesting background. I always kick off every podcast really trying to walk our listeners through what you do and how you got here. So could you walk us through some of your previous roles, experience in the betting industry in particular, not just at PlayUP, but also, as an entrepreneur and investor. And I want to hone in on that PhD. You got, you're a doctor. So most guests we have one. We could talk for hours on this question alone, but give us some context for how you got here and illuminate us on your expertise.
Yeah, thank you. So I am actually a lawyer by trade. So I started my career doing something totally serious, I would almost say. So I started at a law firm called White & Case, wrote actually my PhD in law about the sports betting regulation via the internet many years ago. And basically in Germany at that time, they had a monopoly. They prevented private operators from coming into the market, but then the state operator were aggressively promoting the state monopoly on sports betting. And I felt like that's not right, and that's violating European law. which I laid out on my thesis and then basically published it as a book. And that was the beginning on how I ended up in the sports betting space, actually. And
what was your book called?
so it's called Fixed Odds Sports Betting via the Internet, and it is focused on the European market. And I was actually saying in my book that the sports betting monopoly violates European law. And then shortly after that, the European court decided in the same direction. And it was great for me being a lawyer at that time. And someone at FIFA actually read that book and they hired me to run FIFA's sports integrity efforts at that time. So I joined a company called FIFA's early warning system. And we were basically having agreements with other sports betting operators in the regulated and unregulated markets, so especially with a big one and based in Asia at that time, etc. And we had agreements that they would share information with us if they saw something that could potentially be related to match manipulation. So basically people coming in, approaching athletes, offering them money to throw a game, and then betting on it. And that's how I actually fall in love with sports betting and the data side of the sports betting industry as well. And how we could use the sports betting data to prevent manipulation in sports or investigate and sanction such cases. From there on, I moved on working for CONCACAF, which is a confederation of FIFA, basically responsible for the soccer administration for North America, Central America, and the Caribbean. So I moved to the beautiful Cayman Islands for that job, and did basically the same, using data to prevent manipulations in sports. And which I feel is very important. It's still very important nowadays with a regulated market in the US as well. But the US, Canada, Mexico, they've been all like members of ours and countries that I was responsible for. And from there on, I moved on to Sportradar. So joined them and was after a while leading the US market for Sportradar. When I joined, we were pretty at the beginning. When I left, we had exclusive and non-exclusive data agreements with most of the leagues in the US, including NFL, NBA, NHL, NASCAR. So it was pretty exciting. And when we hit the valuation of 2.6 billion at that time, I basically said, okay, now we're at the point, we had 85% of market share in the US already. I felt like there's not much I can achieve anymore. So it's time to something new. Left Sportradar, moved to Las Vegas, and started doing consulting here. And since then, I've been like investing in many different sports, tech startups, advising companies, and then I got to meet PlayUP, and they were looking for a CEO for the US market, and I was very excited to join them. And since then, I'm leading the US market for PlayUP.
Amazing. So no shortage of accolades or distinctions, certificates. You're a professor, you're an attorney, anyway, global. You got you're doctor. You're like the doctor of sports betting. So let's dive right in. Leaders in sports award under 40, SBJ, game changers. So we're going to listen to your advice here, Dr. Mintas. Give us your perspective then on, the U.S. and specifically, everyone is dying, and North America, by the way. Canada, as you know, is opening up. This market is in its nascent stage, and as you know, COVID's really accelerated legislation across this country and up in Canada. So that this market's opening up. You've been in the market in Europe, as you'd mentioned, and Asia for quite some time. To kick off this conversation, then, what's your high-level look at the state of sports betting in the U.S. for those that again aren't deep on the betting side here?
Yeah, we just celebrated the 3-year anniversary of legalized sports betting in the US, or I should say the repeal of PASPA 3 years ago that enabled the states to start legalizing sports betting if they want. And when sports betting got legal, or when PASPA got repealed almost 3 years ago, a bit more than 3 years ago, actually, many experts in the space said it will take time for the states to legalize sports betting. If we look at today, we have already 25 states that have legalized sports betting in place. So half of the market is already legalized. Most of the markets are just getting up and running, as most of the operators do. So it's really a land grab at the moment about getting into the market. Here in the US, we have a state-by-state regulation. So every state got to decide what the tax rate is, how many operators they allow, who are the operators, is it land-based casinos, is it racetracks, does sport deserve their own skin, as we call it, a license, basically, to offer sports betting. And then we see iGaming, so online casino, getting legalized across the state now as well. So overall, I couldn't be more excited being in the middle of that. The US is supposed to become a $60 billion market, according to some estimates out there, might be even higher than that from my perspective, but for sure it will be the largest legalized sports betting market in the world. So we have hands-on leagues in the US, different than you have in Europe. So you have leagues that were fighting for 7 years against the legal legislation of sports betting. So betting got legalized. They said, okay, now we cannot change that anymore. Let's benefit from that. And they started trying to introduce integrity fees and official data requirements and actually monetize sports betting. As of today, only 4 states out of the 25 have decided to go with a mandated official data requirement. But in fact, many operators like PlayUP decided to use official data, even though there's no requirement by law. But it's an interesting environment and how everything's been set up, and there's no copy and paste of any European or Asian experience or Australian experience. So US will be a totally different market by many means. But for sure, that will be the largest legalized betting market.
And COVID, as you know, accelerated all of this. We talked about it pre-pandemic, but you're in the middle of this, like how much the whole industry is leaning in, asking us questions every day. So just playing off of that, your high level view of the industry, we've been working together for some time, and as you mentioned, you were the deputy president at Sport Radar, a major data company. You were the chairwoman of the strategic advisory board at BetWorks, a betting platform, and now you're the CEO of PlayUp, which you'd mentioned is actually a betting operator. So really interesting perspective, because you've spent time in 3 major areas of the industry, and that ecosystem needs to work together to ultimately allow fans to bet, a core behavior of the fluid fan, in our opinion. So tell me about quickly the ecosystem and its complexity, and where you've seen technology making the biggest impact in the betting industry, and where might we see opportunity. So first, what's the ecosystem? You laid that out very cleanly for me and our women's leadership board this week, but also how tech, since we talk a lot about tech on this podcast.
Yeah, the tech will be the big differentiator, and most of the operators in the US don't even own their own tech yet. And we see the trend being that more and more operators want to own their own technology. That's how we basically built BetWorks within 24 months, and so did Bally Sports last year, which is a betting platform. And PlayUp obviously has their own tech in-house. So we have our own risk and trading, our own platform. And just to give you one example, it actually leads back to your question on innovation and tech as well. So when COVID hit the industry and traditional sport got suspended, all the operators were asking themselves, okay, what I'm going to offer now to my clients, to people that want to bet on sports, because if there's no sports betting and there's no revenues. And what we at PlayUp did, and we could only do that because we have our own platform in-house, within days, we were able to come up with fantasy sports products on horse racing, on esports, and just got them launched, and were able to actually offer content, so we could actually increase our revenues during the pandemic. And it shows you how important it is to own your own tech. The other big differentiator in the US will be the risk and trading. So being able to actually balance your book and trade US sports. We've seen like a lot of US, we've been seeing a lot of European operators coming into the US. And I always like to say, I'm from Europe myself, I'm from Germany. So in Germany, soccer is the #1 sports, and the risk and trading teams are mainly made to trade soccer games, which have a totally different dynamic than NFL or NBA or even NHL or MLB. And therefore, you need a risk and trading team that is actually capable, and the team, actually human beings behind that tech that understand US sports. And that's one of the advantages being Australian, being originally an Australian company, because Australians bet a lot on US sports. So 80% of what Australians bet on is already US sports. So that experience helps for sure. But bringing the conversation back to the ecosystem. So always when we speak about tech, if we speak about sports betting, what really makes a difference is the technology behind it and the data. And so tech and data are both what I feel like is critical in the space. So the leagues need to make sure they offer the best data in the market. They work with companies like Sportradar or Genius Sports, obviously, to collect the data. But we are now in 2021, and we still have a lot of manual processes behind collecting data. And I feel that's where the innovation is a little bit missing. I know the NBA and other leagues, they experimented around with optical tracking systems, but we're not quite there yet to use data that is not manually tracked, to use that for sports betting. So there's a revolution I'm waiting for that has not happened yet. And the other thing I would say, tracking data. So really like speed of athletes and things like that you can track on the field, and biometric data. Other two fields of data where it needs innovation, where we will see a lot of movement over the last years.
Yeah, we've talked a lot about that, offline, around the data coming off the athlete. We wrote a report a couple years ago now around athlete-driven media and all the data that's coming off the athlete for storytelling and fan engagement holistically, digital overlays, et cetera. But increasingly, their heart rate and their heart rate variability and their sleep patterns and all the things that, I mean, if you're leaning in and you're putting big money on the line, give me any inch that I can see. Maybe there's a correlation, maybe there's not. I mean, I know I've had bad nights of sleep, and I had the most phenomenal game the next day. So, but look, everyone's looking for an edge. And we've talked about how that data at some point could be unlocked if it's viable, if it's trusted, and certainly if the athletes and the leagues and the properties can negotiate a way to share in that upside. So I don't know if you have any thoughts just quickly on the biometric data that you'd reference, because that to me is a really interesting part of the ecosystem that kind of gets talked about, but we're not really there yet.
Yeah, think of something like having a wearable that kind of like collects the heart rate, and then you see a special player just before he's going to score, you see the heart rate, and you're kind of like be able to use that information to make a more informed betting decision. And it's not only the betting behind, it's more also the entertainment, right?
Totally.
During the game, if I could see your heart rate while you're playing hockey, I mean, this would be like phenomenal information.
What you'd see is that, you'd see that I was calm and collected. I was in the zone, right?
And you see the outside, and then you actually see, oh my God, Angela seems to be so relaxed, but then you see the heart rate, right?
Like, oh my God, I have a penalty shot, I got to score.
and making that available for entertainment reasons, but then also betting. And betting is a part of entertainment, right?
Yep.
I mean, you guys were involved in many studies and data points that kind of like prove that the more skin you have in the game, the
Yeah.
more you watch it and the more games you watch.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. Yeah. Actually, on that point, we do study this betting behavior. It's one of the, again, core fluid fan behaviors that we're looking at. And again, technology is really transforming this opportunity. A Seton Hall University sports poll found that 70% of Americans surveyed say they're more likely to watch a sport if they've placed a bet on it. And we've seen lots of these kinds of polls and statistics out there. If you have money in the game, skin in the game, and in this, fantasy we've been seeing for a long time, you're more likely to engage in it. Given all of that, how do you recommend leagues, properties, teams work with betting platforms, betting operators to really win the battle for fan engagement? Are there best practices that you can recommend? And again, as you think about the aspects of that partnership that really work well.
yeah, and it's really hard to comment on that and not offending anybody here. But I love the leagues. Have worked with all of them over the past years, and I just feel at the moment, from what I'm seeing, none of the leagues is really innovative in terms of betting. So what we see now is a betting / league relationship where most of the betting operators either sponsor teams or become a official partner using official data, but it's more like the leagues benefiting from that through a rev share model or flat fee, whatever it is. But I think a true partnership needs to be more than that. And from a betting perspective, what's really interesting, really valuable is like getting the hands on the user data, obviously. So it's a big competitive environment already on the sports betting side, and then having access to the user data is obviously very interesting for betting operator. But I think it needs to be more than that. It should really be a partnership hand in hand. And we don't really see that yet in the US, but I think it's probably over time we will get there.
We're early, right? We're still, states are still you said 25. I mean, we're only halfway there, and who knows if we'll ever get to the full 50, but we're early, right? The market's early.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And it's also early for the leagues, right?
Yeah.
Of course, now have to see like what's their position in the market moving forward. Do they
Yep.
want to only license their data and be kind of like someone sports betting operators would partner with as a sponsor, or does it make sense to create maybe a joint product really that you get to market that helps engage fans?
All right, Dr. Mintas, another major behavior that we talk about a lot is the ability to learn. If fans can learn and understand, we know that goes hand in hand with betting. If you don't understand the spread, the odds, the actual game itself, me betting on a football game, probably going to lose my shorts in that. Me betting on a hockey game, another story. I know the rules. I've understand the odds. I know the nuances. Tell us about leaning into this behavior. If fans are actually more engaged, if they understand, if they learn, operators need to be able to again educate the fans on what they're betting on and help them make ultimately smarter decisions. Is there a way, again, that you're seeing the betting industry helping to educate those fans as they're watching, informing them so again they can put money, and especially as there's a lot of first time sports bettors. I think that's really important. There's the diehards, or those that maybe have been on the illegal market for a while. But this casual fan is like the gold in this industry. If you can get them on your platform, placing that first bet and giving them a way to come back, which I think to me is you can understand what you're putting money on. You're learning, like, how is this whole ecosystem evolving to again educate on the fan, not just on how to bet or what platform to be on, but actually now that you got me, how to keep me there with again that kind of educational flywheel?
Yeah, that's a great question. So I think two things I would like to say to that. So one is we see in the US a lot of the focus is a lot on acquiring customer, but not so much on retaining them. So that's actually a really great point that you're making. The second comment would be the best way to actually educate people about sports betting is a free-to-play offering. And we work, for example, with Sharkline Sports that's offering free-to-play across the nation. And we were able to build a database already for states that we're not even in yet. So I think that's great. It's basically the same as you would place a bet. You even see what you would win if that would be a real bet, but then you're not placing money behind that. It's basically doing a sports bet without paying for it, and then you can win like betting credits, or in our scenario, we are PlayUP is a sponsor of the New Jersey Devils, so you can win a jersey of the Devils or other limited merchandise articles as well. So there are a lot of different ways to get that done. And we see a lot of the media companies, the broadcasters in the space, being very interested in free to play because they have the eyeballs on their offerings, on their properties, but then they need to transfer the traffic and keep people engaged and entertained. And the best way to do it is with free to play, because then you basically offer betting without actually doing betting. And so the whole restriction of getting licensed, etc., is not there, which is still a bit of a challenge for many operators on the media side in the market. So many of the broadcasters, they're not too interested to become a sports book themselves, because they would have to go through licensing, which means like disclosing a lot of personal information. So therefore, the best way to keep their own user base entertained is offering a free to play. And that helps educating the market. So that's basically the first step for people to actually understand what their decision would lead to if that would be real money.
So free to play is obviously a big piece of it. Maybe you can dive deeper for those that don't know PlayUp, and you've been alluding to it, but let's talk about, again, PlayUp here in the US, and it's one of the largest companies in Australia for fantasy. Tell me about what you guys do, what separates yourself, in your opinion, in the market, and maybe the underlying technology that you build.
Right. So we are the largest fantasy provider in Australia. We also do sports betting and fixed odds horse racing and esports betting and a bunch of other very innovative products that we don't even have in the US as of today. Here for the US, we basically started operating in Colorado. We have a lot of other states coming up this year, and then also over the next couple of years, we secured massive market access. So part of that land grab that I mentioned before to get the foot on the ground. But overall, I think what differentiates us is, as we own our tech, as we own our risk and trading, we are not afraid to take on bigger bets. And so we are focused on the mid to high-end customer base. And you can only do that if you have an aggressive offering, if you have the best odds in the market. So for someone that basically plays $2 or $5, it doesn't really matter how the odds are. But if you're placing like $10,000, it really matters. And so we are focusing on those customers. And from my previous experience with BetWorks and with other companies in the market, is that many of the bigger operators in the US, they're a bit reluctant on taking those bets if they don't own their tech and they don't own their risk and trading. They might run into financial risk if they take on bigger bets, and that's why most of them have pretty low limits. So that's a niche market for us. So we are not focused on necessarily have a lot of customers, but we want to have the right customers.
You want the whales, as they say, the The deep pockets that want to put a big bet and win big, and you need to get that right if you're taking on that risk.
Yeah, we feel like very confident in kind of taking those bets, and that's our differentiator for the US. Apart from offering 150 different sports and different markets, and another big differentiator is that we don't only focus on sports betting, we also focus on iGaming, and then we have this massive experience in horse racing. So it's a no-brainer for us to bring that into the US as well.
What about data? And, we talk a lot about how the data and the insights from understanding the fan. I mean, that's literally what we do for a living, is think about, do you know your fan? How does that inform your strategy? And if you're finger in the wind, not good, in my opinion. So we're, what Sports Innovation Lab does. We're trying to help the whole industry with data understand their fan. How do you approach that? Because I know that's really important as we've talked about PlayUp. Approaching the fan and the user experience itself.
Yeah, I think the theory of the fluid fan is what we see already in the market. So people are very demanding, but they're not very loyal to their initial sport teams anymore. So we change as we go. And we see that with a younger generation. We obviously can only take bets for people that are 21 plus, as everyone else, and we stick to that. But kind of like being aware of those changes. So what you see in the sports betting market is that people bet a lot on their local teams, even though if they have no chance of winning, you still see people kind of like putting, as we call it, the money on that. But kind of like understanding that and analyzing and personalizing the fan and the fan experience makes totally sense. And we will do a lot of innovation in that space.
Mm-hmm. I'm probably the dumb money, because I don't know. I'm just having fun. I'll put a few bucks here and there, but maybe one day I'll be that whale and be able to really sit next to the side. That's my biggest thing. Anytime I put money on a game, or whether it was fantasy or real life, I need to understand. But to your point, I'm just understanding that fan, the spectrum of fluidity of the diehard better versus the casual, and what is your product experience as a result. There's no one size fits all approach in any market now.
Couldn't agree more. Yeah.
So tell me personally, then, you're a very impressive individual. I consider you a good friend. You are making personal bets now in technology. I know the SPAC market is blowing up, and we certainly need more women to be involved at all levels of investment. And you're personally leaning into that space, the SPAC space, the investment space. Tell me a little bit about your world outside of just being the CEO of PlayUp and the sports betting expertise that you brought to the table, and where you really see the future of investment, but also women specifically in this market.
Yeah, so the SPAC market used to be very hot earlier this year, and some of the experts says it cooled down now a little bit, but there's no doubt that it will come back very soon. So I think the SPAC market is something that just kind of like got introduced to our industry when our friends at DraftKings did the SPAC last year in the middle of a pandemic. Mm-hmm. And since then, our industry has that's been more a focus for our industry. But if you look into the numbers, there are a lot of SPACs out there. But if you look into the volume of our market, of our industry, with like 40 to 60 billion very soon, the sports betting companies and the iGaming/gambling companies are still very, very much underrepresented in the SPAC market. So therefore, I am a strong believer that trend on the SPAC market and the marriage with gambling and gaming companies will continue over time. Mm-hmm. In terms of innovation in the space, I always look for innovative companies. I'm very proud to be a member of the Sports Innovation Lab advisory board, obviously. and working with women CEOs and founders in the space is always fun. So I look out for those companies as well. And then just basically invest where it makes sense. And so as of today, I have my kind of like own portfolio of companies where I invest and where I'm a shareholder. One of that is Bedworks that we sold to Bally's. Another one is PlayUP, obviously. But I'm more focused also on startups, because I feel like this is those people that are creating startups, they're so hungry and they want to achieve something. It's just such a positive energy. And also it kind of like keeps me involved. So I see a lot of innovative companies and the trends in the market. So it's kind of like almost like a personal hobby, if you will, and rather than work. But yeah, I couldn't be more interested and excited about our industry with tech, with sports, which are both fun, and then with a betting angle that comes in. And I've got approached a lot by companies that want to get into sports betting, and they're just wondering, okay, that's what I have nowadays, and how can I get into sports betting? And that's most of the requests that I get like that.
No doubt your phone is ringing off the hook these days with all the different hats that you wear and interests that you have and expertise that you've acquired. And I value your contribution to what we're doing and you know, the friendship above and beyond. You're also a very good person. So
I'm a big fan of Angela, as you know.
Well, it's been fun just getting to know you, learn from what you're building, Dr. Mintas, and sharing those insights here on the Fluid Fan podcast. Before we turn it over to our favorite topic at the end, which is our 4 questions with number 4, where I'm going to ask you about innovation. Are there any parting thoughts that you want to leave with our listeners around just where the market is headed either in betting or outside? Just again, macro level views of where the industry is headed, in your opinion?
Yeah, I think as the market general continues to mature on the betting side, but then also on the tech side with more innovation happening every day, I think data is just continues to be so important. How do we collect data, but then also how do we understand, how do we interpret data makes a big difference, and will be key for many businesses, including betting, but also the sports sector in general. So I started very early getting into the data space, but I keep being a big fan of kind of like, how do you understand data? It's really the difference once you have it collected.
No, don't just give me more, give me the right data and tell me what it means. Don't just layer in more. I love that thought, because that's what we're doing. We're building data. It's the differentiator. It's the objective. It's the, you know, the insight that helps you with everything in your business. So great answer. All right. So I'm going to ask you a few questions around innovation and your perspective in general. We'll just kick it off. The general one, what's innovation mean to you?
Innovation means to me really using the tools that you have today, but applying that for the future and kind of like doing stuff that has not been out there before. It's so easy to copy and paste what's in the market, but what's really interesting is like thinking outside the box. And that's what I'm trying to do with every company that I'm involved with, is like not going the traditional path, but really trying to think outside the box and doing something that where people go like, oh my God, I haven't seen that before. That's my definition.
Great. What's the most innovative person in our industry or outside, but always easier if you reference someone internal into sports, someone you look up to or really make sure you listen to?
I think that's you.
All right. No, I was kidding.
Anybody else? I'm a big fan of what we are doing with the Sports Innovation Lab and how we revolutionize and understand the market when it comes to data. So, not here, Angela, but
I'll make sure to buy you a nice dinner for that one. I didn't see that coming, but thank you. Who's the most innovative company in sports tech? Who's a group? You can't say PlayUP because obviously, of course, it's PlayUP. Who are you building? Who are you partnering with? Who's a group that you're just in general are fascinated by what they're doing outside of betting across the whole ecosystem?
It's very tough. It's really a tough one for me.
I hear you. This is a real hard one. There's so many companies, but
it didn't give me time to think about it. So I'm not too spontaneous, but I would say there's so many great companies out there, and I have one actually, and if people start now looking it up, they will probably not find much because we are kind of like keeping everything top secret at the moment. But it's called Spy Sport, and it's actually a TV show, a reality TV show that's focused on women only, and where we build an ecosystem around that that enables sports betting and click to buy and free to play and a lot of other things, so live chat. So it's very entertaining and kind of like combines reality TV with sports betting and other interactive tools, if that makes sense.
I love it. Is there a website we can go to?
Not yet, it's top secret.
All right, top secret. Keep your ears open, everyone. I've gotten a little window into it as well. It's super interesting. What I love about that, and you mentioned women, as you know, with the Fan Project and everything we're doing, we're very focused on the women's market and saying you can't lift and shift the same model. You have to think about that individual consumer and how they actually want to consume sports. And in your case, you previewed it's the storytelling, the reality show. It's more than just the statistics and the the dunk, so to speak. All right. So we'll keep us posted if when you guys go live, we'll make sure to talk about it. What about an innovative league, team, federation on the property side? Who do you like? Who do you like globally?
I'm sure everyone says NBA, and that's probably true somehow. But at the same time, I wouldn't make it so easy for the leagues in the US because I believe like there is much they could do. Just kind of like collecting tracking data in real time and making that available for sports betting needs to be the next move here, and I'm sure all the leagues are looking into that and working on that. So I'm not speaking biometrics. It's really like think of a company like Shot Tracker, right, that I'm advising as well. So it's a company that basically puts sensors into the ball and on the player and in real time collects data. This kind of like data is what we need, and I think it would be so engaging for fans to have that while watching a game. Yeah, of sure, I want to use that for sports betting, right? But you can use that also just to entertain people, and I don't see any of the leagues out there on a global level collecting those tracking data in real time and using it for fan engagement purposes, including sports betting. So I kind of like feel that's the next step. I'm sure all the leagues work on that. I know some have that available, some don't. But I think that's probably the next big step that I would love to see.
All right, Dr. Mintas, so much fun chatting about investment and SPACs and data and betting, Fluid Fan, and women, and then your private projects. I'm so excited for you. You are definitely at the epicenter of so many interesting conversations, and what you're building. Obviously, at PlayUP, I'm sure will be a success with you at the helm. So thank you for coming on and sharing your advice to our listeners on the Fluid Fan podcast. Really appreciate it.
Thank you, Angela. Always fun talking to you. Thank you for having me.
Thank you again to my good friend, Dr. Laila Mintas, for sharing all of her insights on the sports betting market. It is a hot space, and it's good to have an expert share her thinking with our listeners here on the Fluid Fan podcast. It's moving quickly. We're monitoring it every single day, but I'm sure you heard her comment on how data and technology are really going to drive innovation in the space, and how betting will definitely open up opportunities for fans with the sports that they love. So I love anytime someone says data or tech, because that's what we study every day. And I agree with her. This space is blowing up. and wrapping your head around it is quite confusing. So again, super grateful for your time, Dr. Mintas. Want to wrap it up by thanking my producer, Jack Barlow, as well as my entire team at Sports Innovation Lab. We've been supporting the market now for almost 5 years, really helping the industry understand the fluid fan. So grateful to you, our listener, for participating in today's podcast. Continue to subscribe, share, like, tell us who you want to see on the show. Ping us on my channel at Angela Ruggiero, at Sports iLab if you want to hit up our company channels on Twitter or LinkedIn. And one more plug for the Fan Project. Again, June 21st, mark your calendar. It's our next research report that you're able to download from our website, sportsilab.com. You can find that report there on the 21st, but all of our other research reports are there in an easy downloadable PDF, so you can hear more and follow along as you listen to this podcast. Those have definitely provided the framework for a lot of the conversations that we have with our guests on this podcast. So until next time, thanks for listening. Thanks for being here. Always a pleasure. I'm Angela Ruggiero. I'll see you next time on the Fluid Fan Podcast.